Hi Year 8, welcome back to your next lesson with me, Miss Theka. So over the past two lessons we've started a new unit where we've been looking at the history of women through time. First lesson was just quite a general introduction. Then last lesson we looked at women and crime and punishment throughout the medieval period. So in today's lesson, we're jumping forward in time a little bit into the 1600s, or the end of the 1600s, and we are thinking about the Salem Witch Trials. So make sure you've got some paper. Write down your title for me, please. What happened during the Salem Witch Trials in 1692? And then, as a focus task, underneath your title, I'd like you to write, where in the world do you think Salem is? Have you ever heard of Salem before? If so, you might maybe know where it is. If not, and you've never heard of Salem before, just have a guess. Where do you think Salem is in the world? Because it is a real place. So pause me now, date and title down, and then write down for me, please, where in the world is Salem? And then write your answer. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. I tried to make it as big as possible, but I know that it is a little bit blurry. Salem is in the USA. To be more specific, it's in the state of Massachusetts. You can see it, well, you can't see it super close, but you can see the arrow that I've zoomed in there, just on the side there. So it's located in the North Shore region of the USA. Again, I got a more up-to-date Google map zoomed out. So you can see it's along the coast there, close to some slightly more famous areas that you might have heard of before, such as Washington, West Virginia, that kind of thing there. So you can just see Salem's located there. It was settled by Europeans in 1626. It was one of the most significant seaports in early American history. So you can see here that along this part is the east coast of America. So when Europeans decided to leave their original country and immigrate to the Americas, or the New World as they called it then, this is where they landed first, obviously because they were coming by boat and not by plane. So obviously you stop the boat here at the coast. So a lot of these areas of America were some of the first to be colonised. That means people from different countries were moving and settling to live there, and these were European people mostly, quite a lot of which were from England. This area in particular, in Massachusetts and Salem, was largely dominated by Puritans. So this will be a word that you haven't thought of for a super long time, but actually it is a word that you have studied before. The very first topic you do in Year 8 is the English Civil War and the problems that Charles faces with the Puritan Parliament of England. But if you have forgotten, that's totally fine. I'll just give you a quick recap now. A Puritan is a Christian. They follow the Bible, they believe in God and Jesus, but it's a certain branch of Christianity, so they do things in a slightly different way. Puritans during this time firmly believed that you should live your life completely by what the Bible says, and that's why they're called Puritans, because they believe that they are the most pure out of all of the different types of Christianity that we have. Puritans sometimes got a little bit of a bad rap of being quite serious and quite boring people. Traditionally, Puritans are known as being fun killers because they don't agree in things like parties, they don't agree with drinking or having celebrations. They think that Christian celebrations such as Christmas shouldn't involve any of the things that we most love about it today, like eating too much and drinking and having a celebration with your family and opening presents. Puritans believe that Christmas Day is about God and Jesus, and we should spend the day reflecting about God and Jesus. But Puritans because of their sometimes quite radical Christian beliefs, they were often persecuted and pushed out of the places where they lived within Europe. So a lot of them felt like they weren't safe in Europe and that they would have a better life elsewhere, which is why a lot of them emigrated from European places, so like England, France, Germany, other places like that, and decided to start a new life in the USA, which was known as the New World then, not the United States, America. Later down the line, obviously this here says that Europeans had started to settle on these seaports in 1626, and we know at the top here with our title that the Salem Witch Trials were in 1692, that's a little bit of a fast forward in time. So they've settled there in the early 1600s, and by the time we get to the late 1600s they are fully colonized. So they have settled, they've built a town, they've built their houses, and you tend to have areas where people with similar religious faiths tend to live together. So Salem was dominated by Puritans, people that worshipped Christianity in the same way. But remember, because this is quite important later on, Puritans were very strict. They lived their life exactly in accordance to the Bible. They were quite harsh sometimes on people that didn't do things their way, and they were sometimes known to be quite radical people. So just bear that in mind. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to read out this contemporary source to you. So a contemporary source is another word for a primary source. That means that this information has actually come from that time period. So this has been written by someone who was there during the Salem Witch Trials. So once I've read this source out to you, I'd like you to answer these 3 questions for me, please. What does the source tell us were the symptoms of witchcraft? So what does it describe as being, what's wrong with the girl? What are her symptoms? 2, how does this compare to your thoughts about witches? I suppose that might be a little bit of an odd question. Sorry, my email keeps pinging. But, you know, if I'd asked you to maybe draw a witch or write 3 bullet points down that come into your head when I mention the word witch, does this description match what you imagine a witch to be like, or does it give off a slightly different vibe? And then number 3, why do you think people were scared of witches during this time? Okay, so this is taken from the trial of a girl called Mercy Lewis on the 11th of September 1692, and it says, "The afflicted girl was fitting and convulsing." If you convulse, that means you can't control your body. It's like, I really am popular this morning. Your body is shaking and jolting and you can't sit still. When I asked her for the cause of these ills, she confessed that she had seen the devil and had signed his red book. She had promised him that she would lie and curse and serve him for 20 years. He has appeared to her in the shape of a dog, and this dog produced a red document. She signed her name to it, and he took it away. Okay? So now I want you to answer these first 3 questions. So pause me, and then we'll have a little bit of a chat. Well, we won't have a chat. I mean, I'll talk to myself. I'll talk to you about some of the ideas that hopefully you've been able to get down and answer those 3 questions. Okay, so pause me now. Okay, so question 1. What does the source tell us about the symptoms of witchcraft? It said that she was fitting and convulsing. So that to me suggests that she doesn't have control of her body. If you fit or convulse, you can't control the movement of your body. So you can't sit still, stand still, you might fall on the ground, you might shake and tremble. In a sort of way to someone with epilepsy, if they have an epileptic fit, they're on the ground, they're shaking, they're wobbly. So it's a similar sort of description to that. So that's her symptoms. how does this compare to your thoughts about witches? Well, obviously, I might struggle to answer this question because I don't know what your thoughts of witches are. But I think mostly we tend to think of witches as being old, ugly women, all dressed in black, big nose, maybe warts on their face, tall, pointy hat, broomstick, maybe a black cat, that sort of thing. Or maybe if you're a little bit more modern and you watch Sabrina the Teenage Witch on Netflix, maybe slightly different. But this doesn't really give off any of the traditional kind of ideas about a witch. It just talks mostly about a girl signing a book, which I can't imagine you would think of a red book if you were to jot down what you first think about witches. But this idea of signing the book, signing the devil's book, was something that people were really frightened of. And as well, maybe some of you did think of animals when you thought about witches. No mention of a black cat, but there is mention of a dog. So it was thought that the devil could take any shape of an animal. He's sometimes, and I'm calling him a he because that is what he's referred to, he's often compared as a goat. So if you were to see medieval drawings of the devil, he is sometimes, quite a lot of the time, drawn as like a horned beast or looking like a goat, but sometimes also as a black dog as well. But the mention of animals is quite important because this also becomes, during the Salem Witch Trials, they think it's a good way to try and spot witches. So people that owned pets or people that seem to really like animals. So I think I would definitely be on their hit list because I've got a cat and my cat literally just follows me around the house. He's absolutely obsessed with me. This idea that girls that could somehow communicate with animals were linked to the devil, and this is where the concept of the black cat comes from. It was thought that witches had familiars, and a familiar was the ghost or the spirit of a dead person inside an animal, and then that animal could talk to you and you could get that animal to do certain things for you, which is why if you did watch Sabrina the Teenage Witch, they had a black cat who was their familiar, called Salem, and he would protect Sabrina and would follow the family around and look after them. So again, that was used as a good way to try and accuse girls of being witches if they had pets. So why do you think that people were so scared of... Oh, hang on. Change that. Scared of witches during this time? Well, you've got to remember what I said at the start about this being a Puritan community. So they are God-fearing people and they're very much frightened of anything associated with the devil or hell and the impact that could have if you were seen to be close to the devil or doing anything that you weren't supposed to. So anything that was deemed bad or anything that was condemned in the Bible was a major sin. Puritans believed that you had to live your life as close to the scriptures in the Bible as physically possible, and that's what made you pure. Obviously, anyone who was seen to be signing the red book, talking to the devil, promising that they would lie or curse and be a servant to the devil for 20 years, that would make a Puritan community be absolutely petrified. Okay, so Salem Witch Trials then. What actually happens? I'll just move this text box out of the... no, not that. This. I'll just move this text box out of the way a little bit. Is it going to let me... Let me just delete it instead. Copy. Delete, and then I'll put it back on. So you can see here that this... I know it's a little bit blurry, but this is a map of the village at the town of Salem. So obviously I said at the start it's in the state of Massachusetts. You can see the outline there. The brown triangles are the accused. So they're the people that were accused of being witches. and the yellow squares are the accusers, the people that are saying that they were witches. So you can see that it's quite spread out, but there are more accusers than people who have been accused, which hopefully you might see why in a second. So what actually happens then? A small girl falls sick in 1692. She has fits, she has convulsions, she has contortions. Again, contortion is when you move your body in slightly unusual ways. She screams, she has outbursts of gibberish where she doesn't talk any sense and she just kind of waffles on. And these symptoms seem to baffle everybody. And then other girls seem to catch the same symptoms and show the same things that we see with the first girl. Doctors are really concerned, but eventually they decide that their symptoms can only suggest one thing: witchcraft, that these girls are witches. This grim diagnosis launched a Puritan Inquisition that resulted in 25 people being killed, and it filled prisons with innocent people, and it frayed the soul of a Massachusetts community called Salem, which, even though we are now hundreds of years on since the Salem Witch Trials, the town of Salem is still plagued with its rather grim history of being the area that hung people for witchcraft. So the first thing I would like you to do is, I tried to put this in the PowerPoint but it didn't work. I'd like you to watch this brief introduction about the Salem Witch Trials. It's quite a good clip. So if you go into YouTube and just type in Salem Witch Trials, it should be the first video that comes up. It's 5 minutes 30 seconds long, and it's called What Really Happened During the Salem Witch Trials, and it's this top video here. So watch that video now for a bit of a brief introduction as to what happened, who was involved, who some of the key people were, and then I'll set you off with your main task. So pause me now, open up another tab and find this video for me, please. If you struggle to find it, then obviously email me and I can send you the link directly. So hopefully that video clip has given you a bit of an introduction as to what happened during the Salem Witch Trials and why it became such an awful frenzy of people not being able to control their accusations and their finger pointing. So now we need to take it a little bit further. You're going to investigate the Salem Witch Trials. Normally I would do this in a way where you would be given an individual character, so everyone in the class would play a different character and then you would all speak to each other about your character, but obviously we can't do that. So instead, you'll be sent over a Word document, which is your investigation sheet, and it's got some questions down the left hand side that you need to answer. You're going to answer those questions by reading the character cards. So you'll have 2 Word documents which your class teacher will either email to you or put on class charts or Teams or whatever. So you need to read the character cards and then answer these questions using the evidence from the character cards. So don't just answer the questions without reading them, because you need to be as specific as possible. And hopefully as you read the cards, you should be able to see that there's actually quite a lot more to it than just a couple of girls acting weirdly and, oh god, they must be witches. There's actually things going on in the community as well that might maybe explain why the girls were behaving the way that they were. And I also want you to think about the impact that this had on Salem and how a couple of sort of cheeky lies and finger pointing, telling tales can have such a big impact. So read your character cards first and then use your investigation sheet and answer all of these questions with as much evidence as possible. Okay, last thing. I want you to write a little judgment for me, please. The first thing I want you to consider is, were the witch trials effective or not? And by effective, I don't mean were they a good way of killing people or getting rid of people. That's not what I want you to consider. The witch trials were meant to be a fair and just way to decide if someone was actually linked with the devil. Do you think that these trials were a fair and effective way of judging people? If so, why? If not, why? And use your evidence from your investigation sheet. Then the next thing I want you to consider is, what do the witch trials show about attitudes towards women during this time? Because yes, some men were killed and some men were put in prison, but the vast majority of these people were girls. And also, what does it show about attitudes towards black people and black women? Because one of the main targets was a black woman, and she was seen as being quite an easy target by some of the girls who pointed the finger at her. So consider the Puritan religion, consider diseases of the time, the fact that there was very little understanding about cures for illnesses, and also consider attitudes towards women and black people. And the same as usual, if you want me to mark your judgment or your little paragraph, then type it up and send it to me via email and I'll give you some feedback. If you haven't had enough of the Salem Witch Trials and you found that really interesting, I found quite a good website. It's on National Geographic, so if you go onto Google and type in National Geographic Salem Witch Trials, it comes up with this website here, and it gives you like a little tour around Salem, and then it puts you on trial as well, and then you have some questions to answer, and have like little activities on there. If you want to do that, you don't have to do that, okay? So thanks very much for tuning in again, and I'll speak to you again next week.